Hey everybody, welcome to part 1 on how to make your own trivia crack type game using Swift and Xcode. We will be using Parse.com as our server so we can actually upload and change our game as we like it, as it's on the App Store. So it's actually going to be able to add more questions and more questions while it's still on the App Store without updating. So that's why using servers is such a great idea. So we're going to be using Parse.com as our server, and I'll explain more about Parse.com later in the tutorial. But go ahead and check it out and create an account if you haven't already in order to do this tutorial. But anyway guys, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first thing we need to do is just open up Xcode and create a new Xcode project. And this is going to be a single view application. Click Next, and our product name, I'm just going to call mine Crack Trivia. It doesn't really matter what you call it, it's just a name. The language will be set to Swift and our devices will be set to iPhone. Now click Next and Create. Alright, now I'm going to go over to my appdelegate.swift first, and actually we need to go ahead and go to parse.com. So first thing we need to do is click on Safari or Google Chrome or whatever you use as a browser. So just go ahead and we're going to go to parse.com. And over here on parse.com, you either, if you don't have an account, you want to set one up. I already have an account, so I'm just going to show you the basics from if you have an account. For some reason it's not loading up. Give it just a minute. Alright, now that it's all loaded up, over here in the top right corner you would either see login or create account. I already am logged in like I said before, so just hover over your name over here on the top and click on dashboard. And we want to create a new app, and this is going to be called Crack Trivia. Of course, this actually doesn't need to match the name of your Xcode project, so it actually can be whatever you want it to be. So now go ahead and create. And now we have Crack Trivia as a new app. So first thing we need to do is just click on Quick Start and go over to Data, Mobile, iOS, and we're going to click on Objective-C. And this is an existing project, so now we need to download the SDK. So I already did that. It's just over here in my downloads project right here. So go ahead and double click on the Parse library that you just downloaded, and first thing we need to do is click on that, and also we have Xcode right behind that, so we need to just click and drag our parse.framework underneath our Crack Trivia. And then we need to drag the Parse UI into our Crack Trivia as well. Alright, now that that's done, we need to go to build phases, and we need a link binary with libraries. And as you can see, it already linked the binary with libraries, so it's adding these libraries that hold a bunch of code that you're allowed to actually put inside of your application and use. So these libraries just hold a bunch of if you actually look in here, it's just a bunch of files, and you can actually just pull from those files and use them inside of your application yourself. And that makes it a lot easier for working with Parse or something like that. So now that we have them all hooked up, if you scroll down over here on Parse, it says step 3, add the dependencies. So again, we need to go back to our build phases and link binary with libraries. And down here, you will see that it wants you to add all of these frameworks right here in order for Parse to work alongside your app. So go ahead, and we're just going to add those. So first up is Audio Toolbox, and that's exactly how you would do it. You press the plus sign, then you'd search Audio Toolbox, double click or click OK, and then it adds that inside of your application or Xcode right now. So now we can actually use the files that are contained inside of this audio toolbox inside of your application. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip ahead and add all these. Alright, now that we have all our frameworks added, I'm now just going into my app delegate right down here. And right down here you will see connect your app to Parse. So make sure you're selected properly according to which app you're using. So we're doing Crack Trivia. So be sure that's selected, or else it will not be the correct application IDs. So now that we have all this done, this is actually all written inside of Objective-C, since they haven't exactly updated all this to Swift yet. So first thing we actually want to do is just go into our appdelegate.swift, and we're going to first just say import parse. So make sure it's a capital P arse. So now we have this parse.framework added into our appdelegate.swift, so we can actually use the files inside of that. All right, now that that's done, go down here, and not there. Go down here, and we want to go to func application did finish launching with options, launch options. So go down here, and right before the return, we want to add parse dot enable local data store. So I'm basically translating this into parse language right over here. So it's not, if we copy and paste this right now, it's going to give you an error like so. So now we actually want to just program this in Swift. So now we want to say parse dot set application ID, and then copy our application ID right over here. Copy our application ID right over here and paste it into your application ID right there. And now go to your client key. So your client key will be right down here. And be sure you are selecting the quotation marks as well, or else it won't work properly. All right, now our application ID is set up. All right, now this last part that we're adding right here is actually pretty optional. It says right over here. This is just so it tracks the statistics of when your app is opened. So this is good. I would like adding this just so I can see how many people are going to actually open my application on a daily basis. So let's go ahead and just say pf analytics dot track app open with launch options in background, and we want to say launch options. So this first part is just going to be launch options. It's an object, and then we have a block. And this block, we don't want to add anything, so just say nil, which means there's nothing, pretty much. All right, now let's build and run this. And as you can see, we actually have a problem over here. It says Apple Mac O linker error. So the reason that is happening is because it's referencing something in these parse files that isn't referenced inside of our parse files. So we actually need to import these other frameworks that came along with the parse library. So go ahead and just click and drag those last three libraries into, or last three frameworks into our application. And now if we built and ran this right now the app would show up. And as you can see by the spinning circle in the top left corner, it is connected. So now if we were to test the SDK, we could actually just say test. There's no data yet, so actually let's go ahead and add some data into our view. So first thing we want to do is just say import, or go to your viewcontroller.swift, and we want to say import parse. Enter import parse, and then right down here we want to add inside of our viewDidLoad. We want to say pf, we want to actually say var test object equals pf object dot object, and then it's supposed to be object with class name. So we actually say pf object and then open bracket, and then you'll see class name, and this name we shall just call it test object. All right, and then after that we want to say test object open bracket close bracket. So I'm pretty much doing whatever it says over there, and we'll say foo equals bar. So this is just to get you up and running with parse and testing and making sure that our application is hooked up to parse properly. This doesn't really need to be done. If you don't want to do this, just skip ahead, and yeah. Now we want to say test object dot save in background with target, So save in background with target, and the target is going to be self, and our selector will be nil. We don't want a selector. All right, so now if we were to build and run this right now, you will see that if we test, it says, congrats, you saved your first object. And actually we can see this if we go to our core right over here. You will see that we have our test object, and we created a bar array, or a foo array with a name of bar inside of it. All right, now we can actually go back and just delete that stuff that we just did. Basically all that we did there, we were just testing and making sure that everything was set up properly. So now that everything is set up properly, we can just go ahead and we can drop this class, and we can just say test object. So now we're deleting this class, and we're alright, and now we just want to add a new class. In this class we're just going to call this questions and answers. You guys can call this whatever you want, but now we're just going to create that class. And now if we were to click on this class right here, there's no data to display. So first thing we want to do is create a column, and this column is going to hold our array, which will hold our questions. So we can just say questions, and then we're going to select the type of array, and then create that column. And as you can see, it just created this columns array right over here. And now we need to add an answer array. So now we just click on add a column, and we're going to say answer. And this is actually going to be a string, not an array. And then create the column. And now we have the answer string right over here. And lastly, we want to add our our answers column. So we can just actually say answers. And then we will have this as an array and create the column. All right, and I actually messed up in the naming scheme. So this questions should be actually a string, and then we have answer as a string, but the answers will be an array. So just go ahead and add a row, click on the cell that's right underneath the questions array right here, and then you say more up here, and you delete the column. And this is, make sure you're deleting the questions name. So drop that column. And then now we actually want to add our column, which will hold our string value. So just go ahead and add that string value, and this will be our question string. This is the string that's going to hold our question according to the answer and the answers that we will have provided and the actual answer. All right, so first thing we need to do is just add a question. We can just say, we'll say the question is, what does the fox say? All right, and that is our string. And then in our answers, we will just have an array. So go ahead and say bracket, open parentheses, open quotation mark, close quotation mark. And we will have cow, doesn't really matter. And then or open quotation mark, close quotation mark. I could have picked something easier. That was probably stupid. All right, and then we will have high squealing sound. And lastly, we will just have boo. And then we close that off with our ending bracket. All right, so now we have an array holding all of our answers, and you can actually make this a little bigger so you can actually see your whole thing. So we have cow, high squealing noise sound, and boo. We will just make the answer this third one right here, and actually it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. So it starts at 0, so you can just try to think of it in that way when you're trying to think of the answer. So we need to go back to our answer, and we want to say the answer is this third one over here. So that would actually be the 2. So the answer will be 2. All right, now let's go back to our viewcontroller.swift file over here, and now we're going to work on our program itself. So first thing we need to do is just add a variable, and this variable will just be called the question variable. And this is going to be a string variable. Then we have a variable, and this will be your answers. And this is going to be an array, so You actually want to say open bracket, close bracket. And we want to say it's an array of strings, like so. And then lastly, we want to add the answer. So answer. And this is also going to be a string. All right, so now that we have those all created, our variables all created, let's go over to our main.storyboard. And we want to add a button, or at first we're going to add a label onto our scene. So just click and drag a label onto our scene like so. And we're going to make that a bit bigger. And then we're also going to center the text like so. And if you have a longer question, you want to elongate it this in the width. And we're going to change the amount of lines to, we'll say 3. That way, if I were to take all this text, you have a huge long question, it should all fit inside of this question array that you have right there. All right, so now that that is done, we want to open up our assistant editor, and we're going to link this label up with our viewcontroller.swift. And this is going to be of the type outlet, or our connection type will be outlet, and our name we'll just call this question label, and then connect. All right, and now let's click and drag a button onto our scene. And again, we're going to make this as big as it can be, just in case you have a big long answer. And then right click or control click and drag from that button over to our viewcontroller.swift, and we're going to add this as an outlet, and this is going to be button 1, and connect. All right, now copy and paste that so we have 4 buttons total. Again. And lastly, like so. All right, so now just connect our buttons up to our viewcontroller.swift file like we did before. So right click or control click and drag from our button. Connection type will be outlet, and we're going to call this button 2. Again, button 3, and lastly button 4. Button 4. All right, so now what we just did there is we're naming all of these objects that are on inside of our view controller that we have right here. So now we're actually going to be able to change the text that's inside of these. So first thing we actually want to do is just make sure all these buttons are actually centered, because if we were to build and run this right now, you will see that most of these are just going to go right off the view controller. They're not going to be centered. So let's go ahead and do that. So right click or control click and drag from your button so that it drags over to your view, or you can just simply click and drag if you're not sure on what you're dragging and clicking onto. You can just right click or control click and drag from your button over to your view in your hierarchy right over here. And then you can say it has equal widths, but I'm just going to stick with the rest here. So, and then we're going to center horizontally in container, and then center vertically in container. And do the same with all of those buttons, equal widths, center horizontally, center vertically, equal widths, center horizontally, center vertically, equal widths, center horizontally, and center vertically. And it's also important to note that when you're centering it vertically, it's not putting it in the middle of the container. It's actually just maintaining this position according to where it is right now, and then placing that in the center of when we change from an iPhone 4-inch, 5-inch, and so on. So now let's build and run this right now. And as you will see, now everything is centered up. We didn't do our label, so let's go ahead and do that. So right click or control click and drag from our label, and we're going to make this equal widths. Equal widths, center horizontally, and center vertically. All right, now build and run. And now as you will see, the label is hooked up properly. That rhymed. All right, now let's open up our assistant editor, and we want to right click or control click and drag from our buttons over here, over to our viewController.swift, and we want to add the connection as an action this time. So now actually when these buttons are clicked, we want something to happen. So this will just be called button1 action connect, and just do that basically with the rest of them. Alright, now that we have all our UI elements all set up, now we actually want to call the data from parse.com and put that inside of our application. So we want to say func call data, open parentheses, close parentheses, and we want to say add an open curly bracket, close curly bracket right after you click enter. And now this is great to do, to put it inside of a function. I could put it in view.did_load, but the thing is you don't really want to do that, because then it adds more bloat if you ever want to put that inside of a different area inside of your application. So we want to say func call data. So we're going to call the data from our parse servers, and we're going to say var query colon pf query. So what we're doing right here is we're actually grabbing a query. So we're grabbing a query from here. So we're going to grab this data and put it inside of a query, which is actually, if a query is just basically, it's hard to explain. It's just something that you put inside of your application in order to grab things out of parse and then grab from that query and then place it inside of your application. I hope I didn't confuse that with you. It's just very simple. So now it's just a var query colon pf query equals pf query open parentheses and class name, and the class name we're just going to call this our class name is going to be actually the same as the class that we created. So mine would be questions and answers, but if you added a different class, see, this is where you would call your class name. So if you added a different thing, you would put that inside of there. And also make sure it's all case sensitive, so be sure to do that. And if you ever did forget your data name, just go over to here, click on security, and you will see settings for questions and answers. All right. So now that that's over with, you can just say var query, pf query, class name, and we're going to say questions and answers. All right, now that that's done, just go down here and we want to say query dot get object in background with ID. So now we actually want to grab one of these objects in here. So this is an object right over here. So this ID is actually what we're grabbing. So we're grabbing this ID. So we're grabbing, one second. Okay, so get object in background with ID, open quotation mark, close quotation mark, and inside of those quotation marks, you just want to add the object ID that we created from here, grabbed from here. So now we're actually going to grab every object that's inside of this, and then we're going to place that into an object into our application. And then this block, you just want to erase this last part right here, and you want to close off those parentheses, open curly bracket, click enter, close curly bracket. Then right after those curly brackets, you want to add an object. So you want to say open parentheses, close parentheses, and we're going to grab our object. So this is, we can just call this the object holder, if that makes sense to you. So we're grabbing all these objects inside of here, and we're placing that inside of this object holder. So object holder colon, and we're just going to call this pf object like so with an exclamation point. Click comma, add a comma after that, and this will say error colon ns error. And then right after that's done, just click on, again we want to add an arrow, so it's a dash and then an open, just it looks like an arrow, and then you say void in. So now we created this object, and now we're going to actually take this object and we're going to grab objects from that object, if that makes sense. So so that object that we just created holds everything inside of here. So now we're going to grab these certain specific objects out of that object. Weird. Okay, now if we say error if, we want to add an if statement. So if there is no error, so error equals nil, then we want stuff to happen. else we can report it with an NSLog. So we want to say NSLog, and we can just say there is something wrong, like so, and just close off those parentheses right there. So if we built and ran this right now, first of all, the call data wouldn't actually be used because of everything, and right now my simulator is being used. Okay, so right now if we did this, call data would not be called, so nothing would really happen. But so what we actually want to do in order for this to be called, we go into our view.load and we say call data. So now we're actually calling this function when our view loads. All right, now go back to our error right here, and first thing we want to do is assign these arrays that we just created here, and we want to assign those to these objects that are inside of our parse data. So right inside of there, you want to say self.question. So if I were to just say question like I normally would, it would give me this error. You actually need to add this self.question equals, and then you want to say object holder, and then open bracket, close bracket, and inside of those we want to grab the object name. So this is going to be an object of, this is the questions that we're doing, so just grab the question string right there. So just type that right in, and this is going to be as a string. All right, and now we need to say self.answers equals object holder, open bracket, close bracket, open quotation mark, close quotation mark, and this is going to be answers, or whatever you named it right over here. So this is actually answers. This is the array that we are grabbing right now. And then we want to say as array, exclamation point. All right, and now that is being assigned, and lastly we want to say self.answer equals object holder, open bracket, close bracket, and inside of those we want to say this is equal to our answer column that we have right over here. And then this is going to be as a string again. All right, now that we have those all set up, if we were to build and run this right now, first of all, nothing would happen, but also if we had said right there that these buttons have titles and they're equal to these objects inside of this array, that wouldn't actually be built and ran inside of this, because this is actually ran inside of our view.load. So that would not work properly. So we actually want to say if open parentheses self.answers.count is greater than 0, then we want these answers to be actually placed inside of our buttons. So now we actually want to do that, and actually we want to do that when we have our questions built as well. So we want to say self.question label. It looks like I misspelled that at the start, but that's fine. So say self.question label is equal to self.question. Text. I'm sorry, if this should be question label dot text is equal to self.question. All right, so now let's build and run this, and you should see that the label is going to pop up with the question. So it's going to be a bit of a lag time because it has to load from the server, but there you have it. So it loads up, what does the fox say? All right, now if we go down here and we say self.button1 or actually we want to say self.button1.set title, And we're going to set this title equal to the string that we created right here. And this is going to actually be part of the array. So we want to say self dot answers. And this is going to be our button. Our button 1 is going to be equal to our first answer. And as you can remember, it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is going to be equal to self.answers, and this is going to be 0. So we're grabbing the first object out of that. And then it's going to be for the state, UI control state dot normal. All right, now let's just copy and paste that line. So we have 4 buttons total. And now we have button 2, button 3, and button 4. And then we have these buttons, and we also want to change it to be 0, 1 for button 2, 2 for button 3, and 3 for button 4. Now let's build and run this. And as you should see, everything should build and run into our buttons. So there we have it. And now we actually want this to have an answer. So now let's go ahead and do that. Say self.answer. Or actually, we already did that. So now the answer is actually called in as a string. All right, now we actually want to go down here into our button 1 action and our button 2 action and so on. And we actually want to make sure and actually have something that says that we actually clicked the right answer. So we say if answer is equal to 0 for button 1, it would be 0. Then we have this happen. And we're going to actually just do an nslog for now. So we're going to say nslog, and our format will be a string, and just going to make this log as correct. And then you can just erase the other half, like so. And now just copy and paste that inside of all of your buttons that you have. And right over here in your button 2 action, this will be, of course, number 1. Our button 3 action, this will be number 2. And button 4 action, this will be number 3. All right, and it looks like I did something wrong. Oh, there is a random quotation mark after that. All right, now let's go ahead and build and run this. And now, what does the fox say? Now we have high squealing sound. So now if we were to go back to our application, correct. So now we actually pulled the data, we have an answer, and we put that inside of our buttons. So now when we click these buttons, we say it's correct. Now we can also add an else statement that says you're wrong. So just go ahead and right underneath your if statement, you can just say else this will happen. So you will say nslog wrong, like so. And then you can also just copy and paste that into all of your other buttons as well. And now if I were to build and run this, you will see that I click on that and it says wrong. But I can also click on high squealing sound and it'll be correct. So there you guys have it. This is part 1. I will show you guys more later on how to pick randomize the objects, and then how to actually create users later on. So thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial, and that's the end. Anyway guys, if you guys enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to hit that like button down below. If you guys want to see more tutorials like this from me in the future, be sure to subscribe down below. Anyway guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and if you want to see part 2 and part 3 of these tutorials, be sure to subscribe. And if you guys want to know more about me, be sure to check me up in my social network links down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.